Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2017 GMC Sierra 2500, we're going to be showing you how to install the Demco Premier above bed fifth wheel rail installation kit. But before we do that, let's check it out and make sure that this is something that's going to work for you. So what this kit is going to allow you to do is have a permanent hitch in here that's going to allow you to drop in a fifth wheel head. And one of the cool things about this setup is it's going to work with pretty much all those popular brands of fifth wheel heads. So you definitely have some choices there on what you can use. Now, something I do want to say, you know, a lot of these trucks, I see a lot of them that have the short beds, the 6.5 foot bed, and that's exactly what we have here today. And our customer has a fifth wheel and he wants to be able to safely make those 90-degree turns and those real sharp turns and things like that. Well, some of you may know with the short bed that can kind of cause some interference with the cab and things like that. So what he ended up going with is an auto slide type head. That way when he goes to make those long turns, you know, the head will slide back a little ways and give him that extra clearance. So just something to think about whenever you're choosing what type of head you want. And obviously the rails are going to be here to allow you to mount that head up. And the rails are custom fit to your truck. So, you know, for me, whenever I'm pulling a big heavy trailer down the road, it's nice to know that. It's nice to know that the kit's designed to be paired up with this particular truck and not so universal that you know, you kind of lose a little bit of faith in it. So the fact that this kind of bolts into the frame rails definitely would give me a little more confidence. Just kind of take a closer look at the frame rails. So here's the plates, and this part was super easy actually. These plates literally just line up with some threaded weld nuts that are already in the frame right from the factory, and the hardware just screws right in. So you know, it's going to utilize those factory attachment points, and these side plates actually turned out really nice. Back up top here in the bed, I'm just gonna grab a couple of measurements, and these are in regards to a lot of people want to know if they got some space to maybe put a toolbox or an auxiliary fuel tank or something like that. And we have a bed liner on this truck, so that'll take up a little bit of space here, so just bear with me as far as that goes. But from the bulkhead to the very edge of the rail here, that's going to be right at about 24 inches. So got a couple of feet there worth of space. And if you're curious about the height, you know, how high this is going to come up, maybe have a, you know, a weird bed liner or something, I'll just measure from, we'll come where the channels are higher, and from that, what's that going to be at? That's going to be right at about 1 1/4 of an inch. As far as the quality construction, how these are built, I would say they fall somewhere in the middle. They're not built badly by any means. I mean, everything is solid steel, has a thick powder coat finish on it. Something I'd feel confident using for sure. And just kind of on a side note, if for whatever reason, if you don't need the whole kit, let's say maybe you already have some rails from another truck or something like that, and you just need the frame plates, the side plates. What's cool is you can pick all that up separately and kind of piece it together if you need to, or maybe, you know, you lost a rail or damaged one or something like that. You can always pick the rails up separately, as well as the frame plates, or just grab the whole kit. Just to kind of compare this kit to some of the other ones, you know, I'd say it's right on par with a lot of them. I mean, they're fifth wheel rails, so not a whole lot to it. One of my favorite kits though for any hitch, generally speaking, is B&W. If you're familiar with the towing world, I'm sure you've heard of them. They make really high quality products as well. And actually, our customer today originally had a B&W kit and a fifth wheel head, and realized, you know, I want that sliding feature. I want you know, that hitch to have that auto slide and give me a little extra cab clearance. And that's why I ended up making the switch to Demco here, which is definitely understandable. I get where he's coming from. And by doing that, his thought was, well, I just kind of want to stay brand specific here, have the same brand fifth wheel rails as well as the head. That's something I definitely understand too. Would the other rails work? Probably. I don't know right off the top of my head, but you know, I get it, keeping everything paired together. So this got him going in the right direction, and hopefully it'll help you out too. As far as getting everything installed, it's really not terrible. Like the frame plates or the side plates, if you will, those just bolt right on, so really straightforward there. Even the rails and the bed aren't too bad. You know, you really want to double, triple check your measurements and make sure everything's spot on. The hardest part by far is going to be when you're underneath the truck here, just trying to get the hardware in from the rails into the side plates. Everything is really tight, and it can be just kind of tricky just to get everything lined up and actually started. And the hardest part's going to be actually torquing that hardware down. Since you don't have the space, you can't just use a regular type socket. You don't have the room for it. So that's where things kind of take a little bit of time. And I do, when we're doing the installation, I'll give you a few different options on a couple tools that you can use to make that a little bit easier. So hopefully you'll have them laying around the house, or you know, a lot of times too, you can run up to the store and grab them, and if that's something you need to do. But speaking of that installation, why don't we go ahead and knock this out together now. To begin your installation, you're going to be here up in the bed of the truck, and first thing you want to do is clean out your bed, make it easy to work in here. If you have a drop-in bed liner, I suggest removing that. That'll give us the most accurate installation and make it much easier. With that said, the first thing that you want to do is take one of your rails, and we're going to have to find the placement of it. So you're going to measure from the end of the bed. Make sure you're going from the end of the bed and not the tailgate. And you're going to take that measurement and make a mark. And you want to refer to the instructions for that correct measurement, because there is a difference between the short bed, or I'm sorry, the 6.5 foot bed and the long bed. In our case, we have the shorter bed today. But what I do is make a mark, and then I just use this as a straight edge to kind of draw a line all the way across. And I'm going to get it roughly in position, and then you want to make sure that it is centered in the truck bed. So the way I do that is measure from our wheel well to the edge of the rail on each side, and you want that distance to be the same. So once I find that distance, I also use a straight edge and just make a mark there. That way we have kind of a reference, and we can make sure our rail is going to be exactly where it needs to go. So since that line that we drew, the distance, they want you to line that up with the center of our rail here. And so you can kind of look down through the openings and get it pretty close, just eyeball it. But, you know, we want to go a step further and make sure it's exact and make sure that this is perfectly square. So what I've done is take your measure, go from the end of the bed again, and just go to one edge of the rail. In our case, I just followed this one. So for example, on ours, here today, the edge here is about 32 inches. And so I made sure that the other side was at 32 inches. And now we know it's exactly square. And once I found that, I just took our marker and kind of traced all the way around it. That way we have a diagram, more or less, on where this needs to go exactly. Now at this point, definitely need a couple friends. You're going to take your pre-assembled hitch, set the second rail up front, roughly in position. And then we're going to take this and actually drop it into our rails. If they move around a little bit, not a huge deal. That's why we marked that one exactly where it needs to go, so we can slide it around a little bit if need be. So once you have this in here, what you're going to do, make sure this front rail is squared up and everything and plumb. What I've done is made sure the back was where we originally had it, and then measure the distance between this edge and this edge. and make sure that they're the same on each side. Not a bad idea to check the distance from your wheel wells as well here. Once I found that perfect spot, again, I just drew a pattern around our front rail too, just to give us a reference, make sure that we can kind of constantly keep an eye on it while we're going through this process. From there, excuse me, each one of the rails, this hole, the second one in, that's the attachment points that we're going to be using. So I'm just going to take a marker, put a dot in the center. I already did the other 3 attachment points. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to drill a pilot hole. I just got a small, relatively small drill bit. And, you know, before you start doing this too, check underneath your truck. Make sure you don't have anything that we're going to drill into. You shouldn't, but, you know, if you have any aftermarket stuff down there, whatever, just to be on the safe side. So do your best here to get it in the center. And we'll drill a small hole on each corner. Now what we need to do is enlarge those holes that we drilled to 5/8 in diameter. Problem is, even if you add that large of a regular type drill bit, it's almost too big to go through this hole. And I really don't want to, you know, damage our square opening here in our rail. So since we have each hole kind of pre-drilled and marked already, what I think I'm going to do is kind of just move our hitch out of the way a little bit. This one looks like I was a little bit off. That's okay though. And if we move that out of the way, since we have everything marked already, we can use a step bit like this, or you can use your regular bit, whatever you're trying to do. So with that said, I'll go ahead and enlarge all of our holes. Since this one I am off just a hair, probably just try to shift it over a little bit if I can. So what I've done is vacuumed up all of our metal shavings, and the holes that we drilled, I shot some spray paint over them and let them dry just to get a coat of paint over that bare metal. Slide the hitch back into the rough position. Then you're going to take these spacer blocks here, slide that in between the corrugation and the rail. And then you're going to take these hockey puck looking bushings, just slide them in and line them up with the hole that we drilled, like so. And then we're going to take the long, I believe they're 3.5-inch carriage bolts, drop them down. We're going to do that same thing on the 3 remaining corners. Now we can come over to our wheel wells, and we're going to be working on our frame rail. You know, wipe this down, get it clean, and we're going to be using 4 attachment points to bolt up our side plates. It's got 2 weld nuts here and 2 more weld nuts here. Not a bad idea if you spray them down with some penetrating oil, some type of cleaner, and work those threads clean. I'm just using a tube brush. That way you get some of that undercoating out of there. These GM trucks, they really pack on this undercoating, and any dirt and other junk out of there. And what we're going to do is take our side plate. They are labeled, so you really can't, you know, mix that up. Driver's side. These slots up here are bolts that we put in through the bed. Those are going to, you know, go through there. And kind of line it on up. Hold it in place. We're going to take a bolt, a split lock washer, and get these started hand tight. What I like to do is just get 1 or 2 of them going. That way it'll kind of hold it roughly into position. And a lot of times what you're gonna need to do, you know, every truck will be set up a little bit different, and you know, how you drill will vary a little bit. So you may have to kind of manipulate this plate here to get the bolts to line up perfectly. Looks like I might have to a little bit here, so what I'm gonna do is grab a tool. So I'm gonna use a tool like this. Just kind of spreads out a little bit. You can see right there, one of those holes is kind of blocked a little bit. I'm just gonna take this, put it up through one of those access holes and kind of work that side plate over to hold it in position where I need it to be. Then of course, once we have all of them started, we tighten it down and kind of draw everything together, if that makes sense. So once we have these hand tight, we'll go ahead, go over to the other side and repeat the same process. Now we come back with a 15/16 socket and snug everything down. Now we need to make sure and come back with a torque wrench, tighten down all of our bolts to the amount specified in the instructions. If you don't have a torque wrench, you can grab one here at eTrailer, or a lot of times if you go to your local auto parts stores, they'll have one there available to rent. So back up in the bed here, I went underneath our truck and just kind of took a look at where we're going to need to secure these actual bolts. And upon further inspection, it seems to me we'd be better off taking these spacers that we had in here originally and actually putting them underneath the truck on this part of the corrugation. It's kind of one of those deals because our bolt is literally going through kind of the edge of our corrugation. So it could go really either way, you know. If you put it here, this one at crush. We put it here, it won't crush. But I think what our best option is to pull these out. You know, since we don't have anything bolted down, you can kind of just knock these out. We're going to put these underneath, and you're also going to have these large ones. I think we're going to put these here under there, and that way if it does start to crush a little bit, this is going to stop it and prevent that from happening. If it doesn't, not a big deal. We can always just slide these back out whenever we have everything tightened down. So I'm going to go ahead and switch all these out, and then go underneath the truck. So underneath our truck, you can see here our frame brackets and where our bolt comes down. Take our spacer, slide this through like so. Now all these, you know, they might not go in that easy. You might have to kind of pry up on your bolt, you know, and slide the block in, drop the bolt back down, or kind of pry this down a little bit. Every truck's just going to be a little bit different, you know. But once that's in, we're going to take a flat washer, put that on up, and a flange nut. Get this going hand tight here. And then repeat the same process for our 3 remaining corners there. So now that we have all the bolts in there and hand tight, I came back with a regular box wrench and tightened them down as much as I could, which brings me to my next point. Now it's time to torque them down. And you don't have a ton of space up there, so you can't get kind of your classic socket on there. There's a few tools that you can use to make this a little bit easier. They're all going to be 15/16 in size. One of them's like this. I believe this is called a dog bone, if I'm not mistaken. This one worked out pretty well. It's relatively thin. The other one, you could use a crow's foot like this. And all these just go on the end of the torque wrench, like that. So it's kind of low profile. And then there's another one. I assume this would be a crow's foot as well. It just doesn't have the extra sides like a line wrench or something would. Unfortunately, I didn't have the right size in this one, but tightening a couple bolts down already, one like this would probably work the best. Just a lot more low profile and a little bit easier to get in there. But with that said, we can still make do here. And now that we know what tools you can use to get this process done, let's go ahead. We're gonna grab this one and I'll show you one of them getting torqued and kind of how this works. So the way this works, it'll slide in there and go up and around the bolt. Now obviously before you torque everything, you want to get them as tight as you can with a regular box wrench. Try to draw everything down evenly. But once we have that done, we'll come back and make sure it's all torqued. As you can see, there's just not a ton of room up here, so it's going to take a little bit of time. Be patient with it. You know, take a break in between if you need to. It can get a little frustrating. With everything torqued down, what I did was remove our actual fifth wheel head. And in our case, we had this bed liner. So I dropped that in, kind of eyeballed it, kind of measured out where it's going to hit our rails. And I'm going to just cut an opening out here. I'll lay it in there, make sure it fits, and then I'll do the same thing for the rail up towards the front. So I'm just going to use an air saw to do this. You can use a cutoff wheel, kind of just whatever you have laying around. So I'll go ahead and get that done now. So got that cut out, dropped it on in, and it's in there loosely, but it looks good. Pretty happy with it. So what I'm going to do is just measure the distance, you know, between our back rail to the front one. Take some rough measurements, and then I'll probably just use the piece that we cut out here kind of as a template. So I can just roughly measure it, set this down, make our lines, and come back and make our cut. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Demco Premier above bed fifth wheel rail installation kit on our 2017 GMC Sierra 2500.